I drove through it last Tuesday. I don't know why. I hadn't planned to. I was heading back from the pharmacy on Route 9, and somewhere around the intersection of Miller and Broad, my hands just turned the wheel. It was late afternoon. The light was low and a little gray, the way it gets in October when the sun doesn't quite commit to anything. I rolled the window down. Not all the way, just enough to feel the air. The street was still there. The street is always still there. I grew up on Denison Avenue. The house was a two-story with white aluminum siding that my father replaced himself one summer when I was maybe 11 or 12. I remember the way the old wood came off in pieces, some of it soft and dark from years of moisture, and how he'd stand at the top of the ladder in the late afternoon heat, not saying much, just working his way along the wall one panel at a time. The neighbors on our left were the Kowalski family, 3 boys, all older than me. Their mother used to grow tomatoes along the fence line, and every August there were so many of them that she'd leave bags on the porch for whoever walked by. I can still picture those tomatoes, the way they were warm from the sun when you picked them up, the way the skin had that tight, faintly dusty feel. Mrs. Kowalski passed away a long time ago now. I'm not sure about the boys. I lost track of them somewhere in my 30s, the way you lose track of people when life pulls everyone in different directions and no one notices until they're already gone. I drove past where their house was on Tuesday. Someone's painted it a dark green. Not a bad color, honestly. Just not what I remember. There's a version of this where I feel sad about it, where I sit here and talk about loss, about the way time takes things, about how strange it is to stand in a place you once knew completely and feel like a stranger. But I'm not sure it's exactly that. It's more like when I turned onto Denison and drove the length of it slowly, maybe 15 miles an hour, looking at the houses, the yards, the cars parked along the curb, I didn't feel grief. I felt something quieter, something more like distance. The way you feel when you look at a photograph of yourself from a long time ago and recognize the face, but can't quite connect it to anything. The street exists. I existed on it. Those two things are both true, but they don't seem to belong to the same story anymore. There was a period, I'm thinking maybe in my mid-50s, when I used to drive through on purpose. Not often, but a few times a year. I'd park in front of the old house and just sit there for a few minutes. I'm not sure what I expected to happen. Nothing happened. The house sat there. I sat there. I'd look at the front window and try to remember which room was behind it, and mostly I could, and then I'd drive away feeling, I want to say I felt better, but that's not quite right. I felt like I'd checked on something, like I was making sure it was still there. Now I drive through and I don't stop. I notice I don't stop. I don't decide not to stop. I just keep moving. And at some point I've passed the house without thinking about it, and I'm already on the next block, and it seems fine. It seems like the right thing. I'm not sure when that changed. There are things about that street that I remember with a sharpness that surprises me even now. The sound of the ice cream truck on summer evenings, not the music, which I can't quite recall, but the way you'd hear it a few blocks away, and there'd be this shift in the whole street, kids appearing from behind houses and screen doors swinging open, everyone suddenly oriented toward the same direction. The Patello's dog, a big beige thing with a wide, flat face, who used to sit in their front yard without a leash and never moved when you walked past. My mother didn't trust him. I always did. The smell of someone cutting grass on a Saturday morning. The particular way that hit you when you walked outside before the day had fully warmed up. The sound of my own sneakers on the sidewalk, which was buckled in a few places where tree roots had pushed up underneath, and you knew exactly where to step to avoid tripping, the way you know anything you've done 1,000 times without thinking about it. I don't know if any of that is still there. The tree roots, maybe. Trees take their time. When I drove through on Tuesday, I passed a man walking a small dog on the sidewalk in front of the Hendersons' old place. He looked up when I drove by. Not in an unfriendly way, just the way you look up at a slow-moving car. He had a green jacket on, maybe 40 years old, maybe a little younger. He didn't know me. There was no reason he would. I watched him in the rearview mirror for a second after I passed. He looked back down at his dog. They kept walking. That was all that happened. But I kept thinking about it afterward. Not because it was sad. I don't think it was sad. More because of how ordinary it was. He was just a man on a street. His street, for all I know. His neighborhood. Maybe he grew up 3 blocks from where I grew up, and to him this is just Tuesday, just the familiar walk with the dog before dinner, just the street he knows without thinking about it. That's how it was for me once. I'm the stranger here now. That occurred to me pretty clearly as I was sitting at the stoplight on Broad, waiting to turn. I was the one in the car with the out-of-area plates, moving slowly down a street I had no current reason to be on. My daughter asked me once, years ago now, why I still went back there. She meant it genuinely, not as a challenge. She was curious. She grew up in the house where she grew up, which is 40 minutes from here, and she goes back for holidays and to see her father, and that's more or less the full relationship she has with the place. She doesn't understand the pull, I think. Or maybe she will someday. I told her I went back because it helped me remember who I was. She thought about that and nodded, but I'm not sure I believed it even as I said it. I don't think going back there actually tells me much about who I was. The street doesn't hold memory. Memory is in me. The street is just aluminum siding and buckled sidewalks and other people's dogs. What I think I was really doing in those years when I used to stop and sit in front of the house. I think I was checking on something in myself, seeing if the pull was still there, seeing if I still felt something when I looked at it, or whether the feeling had finally gone quiet. It's gone quieter. Not gone, just quieter. There was a woman who lived 4 houses down. Her name was Dorothy Ames, and she had no children, and she worked somewhere downtown that I never knew the name of. She wore her hair short and practical, and she drove a cream-colored Buick that she kept very clean. She was pleasant to everyone on the street without being particularly close to anyone, as far as I could tell. She'd been there since before we moved in, and she was still there when I left for college. I thought about her for the first time in maybe 30 years when I was driving down Denison on Tuesday. I don't know why she came to mind. I don't have any particular memory attached to her. No conversation that mattered, no moment that stands out. She was just someone who was always there, in the background of the street, the way most people are, the way I probably was to someone else. I wonder if she stayed. I wonder if she's still there in that house, very old now, watching cars she doesn't recognize move slowly down her street. Or maybe she's been gone for decades. Maybe her kids, if she had them, and I don't think she did. Maybe someone cleared out her house and sold it and repainted the shutters, and now a family of 4 lives there, and they have no idea who she was. Both of those things are true somewhere, I suppose. I just don't know which one applies to Dorothy Ames. I've noticed that the people I think about most from that time aren't the people I was closest to. They're the ones on the edges. The woman with the tomatoes, Dorothy with her clean Buick, the Patello dog, the ice cream truck whose music I can't quite recall. The people I was closest to, I still know where most of them are. My sister is in Phoenix. My old friend Paul, who I've known since we were 8, still calls me on my birthday. That's its own kind of continuous line. But the edge people, they're gone in a way that feels different. Not because I miss them exactly. More because they were part of a texture that doesn't exist anywhere anymore. They were the background of a life. And you can't hold on to background. You barely even notice it while it's happening. The house looked fine, for what it's worth. Someone's taken care of it. The siding is a different color now. It was white when we had it, and it's a kind of soft gray now, but it's in good condition. The front lawn was clean and short. There was a basketball hoop at the end of the driveway that wasn't there when I was a kid. I think that's a good sign. I think I'm glad the house is being used, is lived in, is someone's background. I don't have any feeling of ownership about it. That surprised me a little when I first noticed it, years ago. I thought I would always feel like some part of that house was mine. But it isn't. It was my father's for a while, and then it was someone else's. And whatever happened inside it was ours, and ours only, and the house itself had nothing to do with it. The house is just a building. That sounds obvious, but it took me a while to feel it as true rather than just knowing it. I turned left on Grove and then took the long way out, past the elementary school. The school is still there, same building. They've done something to the front entrance, new doors or new framing around them, something updated. But the brick is the same dark red it always was. I used to walk to school. It was 6 blocks, and it felt like a long way when I was 6 and a short way by the time I was 12, the way distances change as you get bigger. I walked it with my sister for a few years, and then she graduated to the middle school and I walked it alone, and then eventually I graduated too, and that walk was over. I don't know how many times I made that walk. Hundreds, probably. It's one of those things you do so many times it stops being an event and becomes just a condition of your life, like breathing, and then it stops, and eventually you realize you haven't thought about it in years. I thought about it on Tuesday, driving past the school, watching a woman load 2 kids into an SUV in the parking lot. I thought, those kids will do that walk, or something like it. And someday they'll drive past and it'll be like this. Just bricks, just a building with new doors. I don't mean that as a sad thought, it just seemed true. I've been thinking about the word recognize. The neighborhood is still there, but I don't recognize anyone. That's the thing that surprised me the first time I really noticed it. Not that the houses changed or the street changed. Those things were gradual, and I adjusted to them gradually. What surprised me was the people. I grew up in a place where I knew, at minimum by face, every person on the street. I knew which houses had dogs and which ones had gardens and which ones you went to for Halloween because they gave out the good candy. I knew which cars belonged where. I knew the rhythms of who came and went, what lights were on when, whose TV you could hear through the window on summer nights. That knowledge was invisible to me while I had it. It wasn't something I thought about or took care of. It was just there, like the smell of Mrs. Kowalski's tomatoes, like the buckled sidewalk. Now I drive through and there are faces I've never seen, cars I don't know, rhythms I have no access to. It's all there. It's all still happening. The street is full of its own life, its own version of what I had, but I'm outside of it completely. That's what's strange. Not the loss of it, just the completeness of the outsideness. I pulled over for a minute before I got back on Route 9. There's a small parking area near the park at the end of Grove, and I pulled in and turned the engine off and sat there. Not because I needed to, I just wasn't quite ready to be back in traffic. It was still that low October light. A few leaves had come down overnight, and they were moving a little in the slow air, not blowing exactly, just shifting. A runner went past on the path, headphones in, looking straight ahead. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular. I was just sitting in a place that used to mean something to me, not quite here and not quite anywhere else. And that felt not sad, not good exactly, Just honest, somehow, like the right relationship to have with a thing. Not turning it into more than it is, not pretending it's nothing. It was a street. It was my street once. Now it belongs to the man with the green jacket and his dog, and the family in the gray house that used to be white, and Dorothy Ames, if she's still there, and all the people I'll never know the names of. I drove home. It was getting dark by the time I got on Route 9. I had the heat on low and the radio off, and I was thinking about what I wanted for dinner, which turned out to be nothing particular, just whatever was in the refrigerator, put together in some quiet combination. That was Tuesday. If you find yourself sitting with a place today, somewhere you used to belong, or somewhere that's simply asking you to slow down and stay a moment, I'd be glad to hear about it. Not because there's anything to figure out, just because it's good to know we're out there, finding our way back to places, and then finding our way home.